53 and 54. And it says, when a person is in deep sleep, his dreams, he dreams and sees in himself many other objects, such as great mountains and rivers, or perhaps even the entire universe, although they are far away. Sometimes, when one awakens from a dream and he sees that he is in a human form, lying in his bed in one place, then he sees himself, in terms of various conditions, as belonging to a particular nationality, family, and so on. All the conditions of deep sleep, dreaming, and wakefulness are but energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should always remember the original creator of these conditions, the Supreme Lord, who is unaffected by them. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. None of these conditions of the living entities, namely deep sleep, dreaming, and wakefulness, is substantial. They are simply displays of various phases of conditional life. There may be many mountains, rivers, trees, bees, tigers, and snakes that are situated far away, but in a dream, one may imagine them to be nearby. Similarly, as one has subtle dreams at night, when the living entity is awake, he lives in gross dreams of nation, community, society, possessions, skyscrapers, bank balance, position, and honor. Under the circumstances, one should know that his position is due to his contact with the material world. One is situated in different positions in various forms of life that are all but creations of the illusory energy, which works under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate actor, and the conditioned living entity should simply remember this original actor, Sri Krishna. As living entities, we are being carried away by the waves of Prakriti or nature, which works under the Lord's direction. Mayadakshena Prakriti, Suyatesa Characharam. Bhakti Vinod Thakura sings, Miche Maya Ravase Yacha Vase, Kacha Habu Dubu Vai. Why are you being carried away by the waves of the illusory energy in various phases of dreaming and wakefulness? These are all creations of Maya. Our only duty is to remember the supreme director of this illusory energy, Krishna. For us to do this, the Shastra advises us, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam. One should constantly chant the holy name of the Lord. The Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The Supreme Lord is realized in three different phases as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. But Bhagavan is the ultimate realization. One who realizes Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the most perfect Mahatma. Vasudeva Sarvam Iti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabhaha. In the human form of life, one should understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for then one will understand everything else. Kasmin Bhagavo Vigyate Sarvam Idam Vigyatam Bhavati. According to this Vedic injunction, simply by understanding Krishna, one understands Brahman, Paramatma, and Prakriti, the illusory energy, the supreme energy, and everything else. Everything will be revealed. Prakriti, the material nature, is working under the direction of the Supreme Lord, and we living entities are being carried away by various phases of Prakriti. For self-realization, one should always remember Krishna, as stated in Padma Purana, Smartavya Satatam Vishnu. We should always remember Lord Vishnu. Vishmartavya Najat Chit. We should never forget the Lord. This is the perfection of life. Okay, very nice. In other words, Smartavya Satatam Vishnu, Vishmartavya Najat Chit. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So this is our takeaway for today already. Haribol. Text 55. Know me to be the Supreme Brahman, the all-pervading Supersoul, through whom the sleeping, living entity can understand his dreaming condition and his happiness beyond the activities of the material senses. That is to say, I am the cause of the activities of the sleeping, living beings. When the living entity becomes free from false ego, he understands his superior position as a spirit soul, part and parcel of the pleasure potency of the Lord. Thus, due to Brahman, even while sleeping, the living entity can enjoy. The Lord says that Brahman, that Paramatma, and that Bhagavan are I myself. This is noted by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Brahma Sandarbha, text 56. If one dreams during sleep, if one's dreams during sleep are merely subject matters witnessed by the supersoul, how can the living entity, who is different from the supersoul, remember the activities of dreams? The experiences of one person cannot be understood by another. Okay. Therefore, the knower of the facts, the living entity who inquires into incidents manifested in dreams and wakefulness, is different from the circumstantial activities. That knowing factor is Brahman. In other words, the quality of knowing belongs to the living entities and to the Supreme Soul. Thus, the living entity can also experience the activities of dreams and wakefulness. In both stages, the knower is unchanged, but is qualitatively one with the Supreme Brahman. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In knowledge, the living entity is qualitatively one with the Supreme Brahman, but the quantity of the Supreme Brahman is not the same as that of the living entity, who is part of Brahman. Because the living entity is Brahman in quality, he can remember the past activities of dreams and also know the present activities of wakefulness. Well, I don't really remember too many dreams. I mean, I have some remembrance of some dreams, but not really. It's not really clear in my mind anymore. Anyway, text 57. When a living entity, thinking himself different from me, forgets his spiritual identity of qualitative oneness with me in eternity, knowledge, and bliss, his material conditional life begins. Oh boy. In other words, instead of identifying his interest with mine, he becomes interested in his bodily expansions like his wife, children, and material possessions. In this way, by the influence of his actions, one body comes from another, and after one death, another death takes place. Okay, so one is caught in the cycle of birth and death. Purport. Generally, the Mayavadi philosophers or persons influenced by Mayavadi philosophers think themselves as good as the Supreme Personality of God. This is the cause of their conditional life, as stated by the Vaishnava poet Jagadananda Pandita in his Prema Vivarta. Krishna Bahir Mukha Hana Bhoga Vanchakare Nikata Sta Maya Tare Chapati Hadare. As soon as a living entity forgets his constitutional position and endeavors to become one with the Supreme, his conditional life begins. The conception that the Supreme Brahman and the living entity are equal, not only in quality, but also in quantity, is the cause of conditional life. If one forgets the difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entity, his conditional life begins. Conditional life means giving up one body to accept another and undergoing death to accept death again. The Mayavadi philosopher teaches the philosophy of Tatvamasi, saying, "You are the same as God." He forgets that Tatvamasi applies in terms of the marginal position of the living entity, who is like sunshine. There is heat and light in the sun, and there is heat and light in the sunshine, and thus they are qualitatively one. But one should not forget that the sunshine rests on the sun. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratisthaham. I am the original source of Brahman. The sunshine is important because of the presence of the sun globe. It is not that the sun globe is important because of all pervasiveness of the sunshine. Forgetfulness and misunderstanding of this fact is called Maya. Because of forgetfulness of one's constitutional position and that of the Supreme Lord, one comes into Maya or samsara, conditional life. In this regard, Madhvacharya says, Sarva Vinam Paratmanam Vishmaran Samsaret Iha Abhinam Samsmaran Yati Tamo Nasti Atra Sampraya. When one thinks that the living entity is non-different from in all respects from the Supreme Lord, there is no doubt that he is in ignorance. or Tama. Okay, so one identifies oneself as being non-different than the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is in complete ignorance. 58. A human being can attain perfection in life by self-realization through the Vedic literature and its practical application. This is possible especially for a human being born in India, the land of piety. A man who obtains birth in such a convenient position but does not understand his self is unable to achieve the highest perfection, even if he is exalted to life in the higher planetary systems. This statement is confirmed in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi 941. Lord Chaitanya says, Bharata Bhumite Haida Manushya Janmiyara Janma Sartaka Karikara Para Upakara. Everyone born in India, especially as a human being, can achieve the supreme success through the Vedic literature and its practical application in life. When one is perfect, he can render a service for the self-realization of the entire human society. Oh, boy. So when one is perfect, he can render a service for the self-realization of the entire human society. This is the best way to perform humanitarian work. Very interesting. Yeah, there's so many people that are doing humanitarian work, but it's not actually uh, helping people oftentimes to go back to Godhead. It's just giving them a little bit of material, uh, let's say, sense gratification, but it's not really helping them to go back to Godhead. So, if there's a person who's hungry and you give them food, like once a week, let's say, that doesn't really solve any problem. What a person needs is regulated help, and eventually to be able to get a job and earn a living. But simply feeding people once a week, well, the person will say, well, thank you very much. They'll say, thank you very much. But does that really help them? No, what they need is a job and a career that can help them for material maintenance. That doesn't mean it's going to help them go back to Godhead, but at least it gives them help as far as having a steady income. So, feeding people, okay, it has some temporary benefit. On the other hand, offering prasadam to people is different. It has a lasting effect. It's different than simply feeding them food. So when the devotees go out and you feed Krishna prasadam to the people, that gives them a genuine, let's say, benefit. But when other people go out and they feed people without any, let's say, mention of Krishna, it doesn't really help them. They get some temporary food, but they don't get any knowledge of how to free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. That is the difference between devotees offering prasadam to the public and other people just giving food to others. And oftentimes, the food is not even vegetarian food. It's meat and fish and other things. So when Krishna conscious devotees distribute food that has been offered first to Krishna, then a person who partakes of that prasadam is definitely benefited spiritually, materially and spiritually. But someone who simply gives food with not offering it first to Krishna and thinking that they're doing some real substantive humanitarian help is false. It doesn't really help a person who eats food that is not offered to Krishna. They might say it helps them, but ultimately it doesn't because there's no connection to Krishna. It's simply it's like a dog that eats something. It doesn't really mean that he becomes uh, spiritually connected. The connection happens when something is offered to Krishna with love and devotion and given to others. I mean, human beings, of course. Okay, so I mean, a dog or an animal can eat food. Now, if you offer, prasadam to a dog, does it actually help him? Yes, it does. It could be a dog, it could be a cat, it could be anything, it could be a worm. If they eat prasadam, they get some measure of spiritual benefit. However, just eating something does not give any spiritual benefit to a person. It just gives them a temporary sustenance, but not any spiritual benefit. So there's a difference between someone who partakes of food that has been offered to Krishna first and then offered back as his prasadam, and food that is not offered to Krishna or anyone else or any other transcendental personality. There's no real benefit in that food. It gives you temporary sustenance, perhaps, but there's no spiritual benefit. So people who eat only prasadam, they become blessed by the mercy of Krishna. And people who just eat food, it maintains them perhaps, but they don't become purified. And in fact, they might be sinful because they might be eating meat and fish and eggs and things like that. Okay, so yeah, oftentimes we go out and we distribute prasadam, but other people are out there also giving people eggs and meats and fish and all these other things. So there's a major difference when one is not given prasadam, but simply, mundane things that are not actually are sinful because there people are given meat, fish, eggs, and so forth. So there's a vast difference between Krishna prasadam and just plain food, and most of the food is usually things that we should never even touch. The bodies of dead animals and so forth that are distributed as food, so called, on the uh, in charitable organizations. People will sit them people down in Thanksgiving and give them turkey. There's no spiritual benefit by eating turkey on Thanksgiving. People might say, "Oh, well, that helped me." Yeah, help you to what? It helps you to forget Krishna. Then it's not going to help you to remember or understand Krishna. So all that type of food distribution is useless. But someone who receives prasadam from devotees and is not, uh, engaging in meat, fish, eggs, and things like that, and also maybe get some spiritual enlightenment by hearing the preaching of devotees. That's a world of difference between just eating grub or food and having prasadam offered by devotees. Okay, text 59. Remembering the great trouble found in the field of activities performed for fruitive results, and remembering how one receives the reverse of the results one desires, whether from material actions or from the fruitive activities recommended in the Vedic literatures, an intelligent man should cease from the desire for fruitive actions, for by such endeavors one cannot achieve the ultimate goal of life. Now, that's very good advice right there. On the other hand, if one acts without desires for fruitive results, in other words, if one engages in devotional activities, he can achieve the highest goal of life with freedom from miserable conditions. Considering this, one should cease from material desires. Okay, so here we have a very clear statement that is, in other words, an intelligent man should cease from the desire for fruitive actions, for by such endeavors one cannot achieve the ultimate goal of life. On the other hand, if one acts without desires for fruitive results, in other words, if one engages in devotional activities, he can achieve the highest goal of life with freedom from miserable conditions. Considering this, one should cease from material desires. Okay? So, if someone goes to a soup kitchen and eats food that has not been offered to Krishna, that is actually sinful. Doesn't really benefit a person to do that. But if someone eats Krishna prasadam offered by devotees, that will give them a tremendous benefit. Now, someone will say, "Oh, what do you mean? We don't see the difference between eating food that's not offered and eating food that is offered." Well, that's because of their ignorance. There's definitely a major difference between eating or respecting Krishna prasadam to just eating food. But only devotees can understand that. The non-devotees, they don't understand anything. They eat anything also. Meat, fish, eggs, anything that's offered to them, they'll eat. Okay, so text number 60. As husband and wife, a man and woman plan together to attain happiness and decrease unhappiness, working jointly in many ways, but because their activities are full of desires, these activities are never a source of happiness, and they never diminish distress. On the contrary, they are a cause of great unhappiness. Wow. Let me read that again. As a husband and wife, a man and woman plan together to attain happiness and decrease unhappiness, working jointly in many ways, but because their activities are full of desires, these activities are never a source of happiness, and they never diminish distress. On the contrary, they are a cause of great unhappiness. Well, that's in the case of mundane people who have no connection with Krishna consciousness. They're just maintaining the mundane body with no spiritual benefit, eating all kinds of different food that often are untouchable for devotees. So they never diminish distress. On the contrary, they are a cause of great unhappiness. That's what happens to people who indiscriminately eat food without offering it first to Krishna, and also without any fish, meat, eggs, and so forth. Text 61 and 62. Okay, 1 second. One should understand that the activities of persons who are proud of their material experience bring only results contradictory to those such persons. 1 second. One should understand that the activities of persons who are proud of their material experience bring only results contradictory to those such persons conceive while awake, sleeping, and deeply asleep. One should further understand that the spirit soul, although very difficult for the materialist to perceive, is above all these conditions. And by the strength of one's discrimination, one should give up the desire for fruitive results in the present life and in the next. Thus, becoming experienced in transcendental knowledge, one should become my devotee. Okay, so there is a major difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. Although it looks like they're doing the same thing. They're eating, they're sleeping, etc. But the devotee will only eat Krishna prasadam, food that's been offered to Krishna with love and devotion. And the non-devotee will eat anything, fish, eggs, whatever, without even offering anything. And just, well, even Christians, they will sometimes say prayers before they eat, but they often eat meat and other things like that that are forbidden in Krishna consciousness. So, is there any benefit for a Christian who eats meat but makes a prayer? Usually, the prayer is real quick. They say a few words and then they start eating meat. Well, that is not really good for people because without remembering God and following the instructions that one should understand to be genuine, let's say, service, devotional service, people just eat unsavory things and just perpetuate their materialistic life and take birth after birth because they cannot see the difference between prasadam and food. Prasadam is not something mundane. It's a supernatural product due to offering it to Krishna first. However, just eating food, okay, it might give you a little bit of sustenance in the present, but in the long term, you don't get any benefit at all because it cannot help you be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Only devotees can understand this. The non-devotees don't understand anything. They just eat, and they'll eat anything also themselves. So there is a major difference between being a devotee and eating only Krishna prasadam, and being a non-devotee and eating all kinds of different things. There is a major difference. Both are being sustained with food, but one is eating in sinfulness and the other one is eating in holiness or Krishna consciousness. So there's a major difference. Someone who's not educated, so what's the difference? They're eating food. The so-called devotee is eating food and the non-devotee is eating food. No, there's a major difference that only devotees can understand. The devotee is eating only Krishna prasadam, food that has been offered to Krishna first and blessed by chanting and so forth, as opposed to simply eating grub, as they say, and getting no benefit at all, no spiritual benefit at all, and forgetting God, not remembering God. So Krishna food is helping one remember God. Just eating food indiscriminately does not really help you remember God. So there is a world of difference between the two types of eating. Text 63. Persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the supreme absolute person and the living entity, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There is no better truth than this. Okay, let me read that again. Persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the supreme absolute person, meaning Krishna, and the living entity, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There is no better truth than this. And there's no explanation of that. Well, the explanation is in the verse. Persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the supreme absolute person and the living entity. Right. Non-devotees will not see this difference between the supreme absolute person and the living entity. They'll see, they won't even see the supreme absolute truth or person. They only see mundane things and mundane people. So here it says, persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the supreme absolute person, Krishna, and the living entity, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There is no better truth than this. Okay. In other words, when you understand that all living human beings have a chance to uh, understand Krishna and engage in devotional service and eventually go back to Godhead. That is actually different than simply being a human being, eating, sleeping, and mating and defending with no understanding of the relationship to God. Uh, those persons are actually not even human. They're subhuman people. But someone who understands their relationship with Krishna and acts in that relationship uh, can actually will have the ability to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So two people look like they're doing the same thing. They're eating food, but one is eating food that is not offered to Krishna, and the other one is eating food or prasadam that's been offered to Krishna. There's a world of difference between the two. They're not equal. That's what it says here. Persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the Supreme Absolute Person and the living entity, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There's no better truth than this. Well, who is one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. Okay, yeah, all living entities who are human beings uh, and who have the ability to try to reach the ultimate goal of life. Yeah, they have to expertly observe the Supreme Absolute Person, meaning Krishna, and the living entity, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There is no better truth than this. That takes this verse requires a lot of what you would call spiritual understanding. And non-devotee who reads this, it will not make any sense to them. They don't see. They're not, as it says here, must expertly observe the Supreme Absolute Person and the living entities, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. No, the non-devotee will not see like that. He'll just see, oh, these are people, I'm a person, and these other people are persons, and that's all. They don't see any divine benefits in becoming a devotee. They're just living like animals, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending without any connection to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, it says here, persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the Supreme Absolute Person and the living entity. Well, people who are atheistic, people who are like animals, they have no relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are bereft of any knowledge that can help them become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. They are like animals. Animals do not have the ability to understand the relationship with God or Krishna. So they're human beings who act like animals, just eat and sleep and have sex and have no tangible relationship with Krishna. They're like animals. And you have to be careful because persons like that are capable of doing all kinds of sinful activities because they do not have a relationship with Krishna. That's why it says persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the supreme absolute person and the living entities. There it is. That's a very important statement. And if you want to reach this ultimate goal of life, you must expertly observe the supreme absolute person, Krishna, and the living entities, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There is no better truth than this. Well, if you don't have any connection to Krishna, you don't see the part and the whole. You just see, like an animal, food, but the animal just sees food and eats it. It doesn't understand anything as being part and parcel of a supreme personality of Godhead. Text 64. O king, if you accept this conclusion of mine, being unattached to material enjoyment, adhering to me with great faith, and thus becoming proficient and fully aware of knowledge and its practical application in life, you will achieve the highest perfection by attaining me. Okay, who is the me? The me is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. An animal cannot do this. The animal cannot understand the relationship with God or Krishna. He can understand food, but he doesn't understand prasadam. So that's why it says here, if you accept this conclusion of mine, okay, what is the conclusion? Persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the supreme absolute person and the living entity, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. The animal does not see like that. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There is no better truth than this. Well, the animals cannot achieve such a vision of the understanding who Krishna is and understanding who mundane people are. The animal simply is living in ignorance. And then people who do not have any, who have not made any effort to understand the difference between a spiritual person and a animal, they remain in ignorance and they remain stuck in the cycle of birth and death. So here it says, O king, if you accept this conclusion of mine, being unattached to material enjoyment, adhering to me with great faith, and thus becoming proficient and fully aware of knowledge and its practical application in life, that's the most important point, practical application of knowledge in life, you will achieve the highest perfection by attaining me. Me, of course, is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, there's no purport because the verse itself is let's see,
explanatory.
Self-explanation. Yes. Text 65. Sri Sukadeva Goswami continued. After thus instructing Chitraketu and assuring him of perfection in this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supreme Spiritual Master, the Supreme Soul, Sankarsana, disappeared from that place as Chitraketu looked on. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 16th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled King Chitraketu meets the Supreme Lord. Wow, what a wonderful,
Hmm.
what a wonderful thing to do, to uh, come in contact directly with the Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead. Okay, chapter 17. Mother Parvati curses Chitraketu. Whoa, this is interesting. The 17th chapter is summarized as follows. This chapter describes Chitraketu's receiving the body of an asura, or demon, because of joking with Lord Shiva. Hey, be careful. After personally talking with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, King Chitraketu enjoyed life in his airplane with the women of the Vidyadhara planet, engaging in the congregational chanting of the glories of the Lord. He began flying his airplane and traveling in outer space. One day, while traveling like this, he wandered into the bowers of Sumeru Mountain, where he came upon Lord Shiva embracing Parvati. Whoa. Surrounded by an assembly of siddhas, charanas, and great sages. Seeing Lord Shiva in that situation, Chitraketu laughed very loudly. In other words, what he's saying is, if I'm not mistaken, Lord Shiva having sex with Mother Parvati, and he laughed very loudly. But Parvati became very angry at him and cursed him. Because of this curse, Chitraketu later appeared as the demon Vitrasura. Whoa, holy Paul. Don't mess with Parvati. Chitraketu, however, was not at all afraid of Parvati's curse, and thus he spoke as follows. Everyone in human society enjoys happiness and distress according to his past deeds, and in this way travels in the material world. Therefore, no one is responsible for his happiness and distress. One is controlled by the influence of material nature in the material world, yet one thinks himself the doer of everything. In this material world, which is made of the external energy of the Supreme Lord, one is sometimes cursed and sometimes favored. And thus, he sometimes enjoys in the upper planetary systems and sometimes suffers in the lower planets. But all these situations are the same because they are within this material world. None of these positions has any factual existence, for all of them are temporary. Okay. The spiritual personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate controller because the material world is created, maintained, and annihilated under his control, while he nonetheless remains neutral to these different transformations of the material world in time and space. The material external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is in charge of this material world. The Lord helps the world by creating situations for the living entities within it. When Chitraketu spoke in this way, all the members in the great assembly in which Lord Shiva and Parvati were present were astonished. Then Lord Shiva began speaking about the devotees of the Lord. A devotee is neutral in all conditions of life. whether in the heavenly planets or the hellish planets, whether liberated from the material world or conditioned by it, and whether blessed with happiness or subjected to distress. These are all merely dualities created by the eternal external energy. Being influenced by the external energy, the living entity accepts a gross and subtle material body, and in this illusory position, he apparently suffers miseries, although everyone is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Yeah, if you're part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, why would you suffer? Only if you engage in ignorant activities. The so-called demigods consider themselves independent lords, and in this way they are misled from understanding that all living entities are part of the Supreme. This chapter concludes by glorifying the devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, the relationship of a genuine devotee and his or her relationship with Krishna is a glorious thing. But how many people actually function in that way? Most people ignore God and they just live day to day, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Some people remember God, but do not engage in practical service to God. So there's so many different things that can be said about the relationships. But the main thing is that one should be completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in devotional service. That will help everyone to make spiritual progress. Okay, so then I think we'll stop right there. So the takeaway is the following. It says, when Chitraketu spoke in this way, all the members in the great assembly in which Lord Shiva and Parvati were present were astonished. Then Lord Shiva began speaking about the devotees of the Lord. A devotee is neutral in all conditions of life, whether in the heavenly planets or the hellish planets, whether liberated from the material world or conditioned by it, and whether blessed with happiness or subjected to distress. These are all merely dualities created by the external energy. Being influenced by the external energy, the living entity accepts a gross and subtle material body, and in this illusory position, he apparently suffers miseries, although everyone is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The so-called demigods consider themselves independent lords, and in this way they are misled from understanding that all living entities are part of the Supreme. This chapter concludes by glorifying the devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, yeah, the relationship of the genuine devotee with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is glorious. But how many people actually attain that glorious understanding? That's the question. Most people are engaged in mundane activities and are mostly ignorant of how to engage in activities that are pleasing to the Lord. So therefore, unnecessarily, people suffer and they never actually free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. They're too busy eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and engaging in some types of selfish, so called spiritual activities. They will only engage in selfish spiritual activities, wanting to get material benefits from God, but not seeking to become genuine devotees of the Lord. Okay, so I think we'll stop right there. Uh, but our takeaway is uh, that being influenced by the external energy, the living entity accepts a gross and subtle material body. And in this illusory position, be apparently he let's see, and in this illusory position, he apparently suffers miseries, although everyone is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. There it is. It's a very important statement. Being influenced by the external energy, the living entity accepts a gross and subtle material body, and in this illusory position, apparently suffers miseries, although everyone is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Yeah, we see it every day. Every day, people wake up and they begin their activities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and with no, let's say, realization of the being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. They don't function like that. They function independently in a state of ignorance. And in that state of ignorance, they unwittingly or wittingly engage in sinful activities and remain what you would call uh, uh, victims of ignorance and repeated birth, death, old age, and disease. That is the sad state of materialistic people. Okay, so therefore it says, uh, um, yeah, one second, go back page. When Chitraketu spoke in this way, all the members in the great assembly in which Lord Shiva and Parvati were present were astonished. Then Lord Shiva began speaking about the devotees of the Lord. A devotee is neutral in all conditions of life, whether in the heavenly planets or in the hellish planets, whether liberated from the material world or conditioned by it, and whether blessed with happiness or subjected to distress. These are all merely dualities created by the external energy. Being influenced by the external energy, the living entity accepts a gross and subtle material body, and in this illusory position, he apparently suffers miseries, although everyone is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The so-called demigods consider themselves independent lords, and in this way they are misled from understanding that all living entities are part of the Supreme. This chapter concludes by glorifying the devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so the ability to understand our relationship with Krishna and act in that relationship is the real purpose of life. And if we don't do that, we're acting like animals, simply eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Basically, that is what is being explained here. So, as long as people are misled from understanding that all living entities are part of the Supreme. They will engage in activities like animals, just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. However, the devotees are glorified. And by glorifying the devotee, and this chapter concludes by glorifying the devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, the relationship between the devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is worthy of glorification. But simply the devotee who has forgotten his relationship with Krishna, that is a very sad situation. And they will have to wait to come in contact with a pure devotee who can and put them on the right path again. Everyone is ultimately a devotee of the Lord, whether they know it or not. But when they don't know it, they get entangled in sinful activities. And they have to wait until they can meet a genuine devotee to understand how to free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. Okay, we'll stop right there. Of course, to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions or comments? Well, the good news is this chapter concludes by glorifying the devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's our takeaway for today.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please chant Hare Krishna today and be happy. Because if you chant Hare Krishna, you must be happy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not happy, that means you're not really chanting properly.